The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor, Thomas Goss, welcoming you to the 16th and final collection of entries from website subscribers for the 2021 Orchestration Challenge. And wow, I actually added up all of the time that all of the videos were going to add up to, and it's like 100 hours. So you got 100 hours of content from me over the past 10 weeks. I hope that people can endlessly compare different versions and different interpretations of Falla's Andaluza for months and months, and just really get whatever they can out of them. And I know that I enjoyed it thoroughly, and it's lovely looking back over some of the material, listening to some of the evaluations that I've already done, and and just sort of seeing what everybody did. I think that is the most satisfying thing for me. So we're going to leap right into Vasil's score right in here, and I just wanted to say, Vasil, I really enjoyed this. It's always great to get something from you, and this is no exception. So I love the idea of trading off between the strings and the brass. Is kind of what it ends up sounding like, right? Because the brass are just so strong. So you can have them playing along, and then into the empty space, it really sounds as if the strings are just suddenly introducing themselves instead of being played over by the brass. Yeah, I mean, it's very fun. I like the way that you've got these the grace notes right in here. It's yeah. So let's talk about that harp to start off with. So here, this is such a great idea, and it is such a shame that it really isn't audible, right? The even without the brass in there, just with winds and strings, you can't hear it in the mock-up, and the mock-up in this case is telling you the truth. It's just not audible. Now, I think if you had like a big roll on one of these chords, like if, let's say that you, okay, I mean, I hate to say this is going to break your heart, but the idea of rolling between or playing alternating and harmonically identical chords. That's such a great idea. So now I'm going to break your heart by saying, listen, the only chance the harp has got in here is to play one big rolled chord every other beat while the brass isn't playing. And then, or even like playing a glissando, bram, bring, bram, bring, kind of, that might be one way of dealing with it, right? But I think just the chords the way they are not going to work. They're too much, they're doubled too strongly by too loud instruments, right? Like the only way to really introduce harp into a big tutti passage like this is you just have to go for the obvious. Either it has to be a big, huge rolled chord, or it has to be a glissando, and a pretty wide glissando. None of these like 1 octave glissandos. It has to be like covering at least 3 or 4 octaves. Or it has to be some kind of figuration or pattern that is in a part of the harmony that isn't being used. However, you're scoring really generously across the whole orchestra. So there really is no little acoustic slot of pitches in which the harp could play that wouldn't be overwhelmed by the forcefulness of the accompaniment. So, yeah, so sorry to say, I don't think the harp is going to work in these sets of 4 bars. Now, here, this is a different story, especially if you bring back the volume a little bit, bring down the dynamics. You're going to pizzicato, so that's going to be softer anyways, and then you have the staccato and so on. So I would say bring everybody down to like piano or mezzo piano, or even mezzo forte at the most, and then just make these into just big rolls. Bring, 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 and then the harp will come through really nicely, especially with a glockenspiel on top. That will work. And this also has to be a little softer. But that is how the harp is going to work in here, and I think that what you've scored here in harp is really nice. And also right in here, just you're coming in off the beat on the on beat 1.5. I think that works great. Right? And then right in here with with screaming high horns, the harp just really doesn't have much of a chance. The horn, especially horn that's played kind of high in harmonies and so on, has a tendency to absorb the sound of the harp. So unless you played like big gushing chords here, then I don't think that the harp has much of a chance here either. And then here, where everybody is forcefully rushing, you have the entire, it's a big tutti section, right? It's no pussyfooting around, nothing is being held back here. So that means that the harp just doesn't have much of a chance either, right? So, and I would say it's also sort of drowning out the glockenspiel quite a bit, and especially since you're using lower pitches in a lot of places. All right, so those are like the caveats here. Those are the the things to watch out for. Now, as to our evaluation criteria, we have the concern of pitch weight in the upper middle register of the piano. Not a concern because you have a big spread of pitches available. You really are filling out the sound picture beautifully. Now, the next question of thematic material repeating in these 4 bars and these 4 bars in the piano score, like these 4 being more or less the same as these, you are addressing that somewhat by having, adding timpani, adding trombones, adding pizzicato basses, and so on. So I think that all comes through really, really nicely. Now, as to the orchestration right here, it's interesting that you form the harmony up high here, that sort of triad. And I like the way that you go CB, 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 rather than BB, 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 BB. So I've seen several other entries use that same strategy of CB, CB, CB. I think that's completely valid. So you have the harmony in the flutes, and then below you are realizing that harmony in oboes and clarinets with a little bassoon below. And then, like, here's the thing though, is that the horns are so powerful on those Bs that they are really, the enclosing the bassoons right in here. The E in the middle of the bassoon really won't be audible. So you might want to rethink that so that harmonic position isn't wasted. And then, here you got the trumpets doubling what's going on here in the oboes and the clarinets. So that's very, very bright too, but at least you have some balance here with so many winds sitting on top of there. All the same, at least, the first trumpet is going to be very powerful, especially going up to, written A sharp, written B, and so on. It's going to be it's really going to scorch. It's not going to scream, but it's still going to be very powerful. I like this little dash right in here at the end. Yan dun dun dun. Now don't feel like you have to finish this by going yan dun 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 dun. Right? when you put weight here on the beginning of this, you're sort of confusing the issue of whether or not this is a motive that goes da 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 dum and dun 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 dun, right? So I think that like this doubling here is just kind of confusing the issue of the beginning of, weight here at the beginning. So I would at the very least bring the volume down, right? Just have this go diminuendo if you have to finish off the B at the end. But I think you can just leave it off and just let the B be answered, right? If you feel that this motive has to end on a B, then just let that be answered here with the violins divisi. All right, then you're coming back to it. It's pretty much the same as before, like I said, but just adding the weight in the lower brass, lower strings, and so on. And I feel that all works fine. Here's an opportunity, right? Since you have the enclosed bassoons right in here, maybe the second bassoon, maybe the first bassoon could be playing the B, and the second bassoon could be helping out with the trombones or something, right? Or doubling the cellos, or maybe there could be something going on here where it isn't kind of wasted there in the middle. Yeah, I like your triple stops right in here. Those are nice and workable. They're all fine. I like the little bit of horn in there, along with the oboes and the piccolo. That's a nice stack right in there. Very Brahmsian, actually. Yeah, and then throwing in trumpet here. So it's all nice. So now let's talk about the next criteria. Melodic development soaring quite high. Accompaniment figures covering a wide range if they were to be scored onto wind instruments. So you sort of have found some interesting stuff to do in here. I think that pizzicato harmonics are way softer than you think. Okay, I don't think that you're going to get the sound that you want here. You're saying pizzicato sol C, so this would be like an artificial harmonic fingered down 2 octaves, and then here this could be like you're saying sol D or sol A. So but all the same, it's still like, unless you really bring the volume down here so that you're accommodating the harp, this is going to be it's just not going to be very powerful, and it's not going to provide a good ground to the pizzicato right in here, right? So it's very delicate. The pizzicato harmonics are incredibly delicate. So it's almost like you are, everybody's going into a big battle here, and you're handing your lower string players like a toy gun, right? That's what it sort of feels like here. So I would say if you want this to have some fervor, some punch right in here, just change this to regular pitches, all right? And then if you do that, then I feel that the accompaniment figure is well supported. And this is just lovely what you do in here with the clarinets and the bassoons. Yeah, and then those triple stops in there. That's all good. So turning to the melodic content, and this is coming in very, very nice. It's a very nice handoff. Bum, 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 bum. Beautifully done, right? No problems. It solves all of the problems inherent in this passage, and especially like trading off from strings to winds. It does that beautifully. But I think you should start from a lower dynamic here, rather than, is this still fortissimo? No, it's not, right? So try this. Just bring the volume of everything down so that you have somewhere to go, right? You can go back to fortissimo. So come down to mezzo forte. That way your pizzicato harmonics have a chance. You could be even softer. And then, dun, 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 and then keep the crescendo going till you get to fortissimo on all these bars, right? Except for the strings. Bum, 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 jump, 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 jump. All right, and then I already talked about this a little bit. Once again, if the harp is to play a role here and the pizzicato harmonics are to play a role, then you really need to bring the volume down. And and then I like this handoff. And this is all nicely done too. The lines overlapping and everything. It's all really nice. And then of course coming back in with the strings on, it's so good. Really, I really like that. Okay, and then that takes us to here. Bum bum bum. And it's really simple. Like all you need are just like four trumpets and a trombone player, right? And you completely change the nature of what this is all about, and it creates enough of a contrast, of a textural contrast to the previous passage. So exactly right, the way to do it. And then just throwing in, yeah, bum 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 bum, dun 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 dun, trading off between the two, and then the brass answering, yeah, dun dun dun. It's all real solid right in there. I enjoyed all of it. I will say one thing though, that is a hell of a lot of cymbal. It just, it almost feels like the abduction from the Seraglio. You know what I mean by Mozart? Sounds like the abduction. There's so much cymbal in there, right? So it just, is there something that you could do to sort of back off? Like maybe you don't need to go tish tish, right? Or maybe you don't need the cymbal right in here. Just seems like a lot. Is there any other percussion instrument that you could bring in? And then the only comment here is, do you really want the pacing here, right? So that if you don't have, if every instrument is basically just playing, yeah, dun 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 dun, then it feels like a runaway theme, right? The theme is just running down the street. It has no pacing. But when you add emphasis on the quarter note, so you get the bumpa 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 bumpa. You know what I mean? It's like somebody is running alongside the runaway theme, the runaway child, right? And of course, this will not be heard, but the glockenspiel would be nice, and just throwing in the timpani at the end. So it's hard to say what this would lead into, right? Transitioning smoothly into the next passage is part of the concern there, which is, admittedly is more for the for like the Patreon supporters who would continue on from that point. But maintaining a driving staccato, you absolutely do that. Other than that, I would say it's really nicely scored. I like the whole nature of it, right? So anything that I could do in this evaluation to bring you closer to that vision, to help make it stronger and more workable for you, that's really what I want to do, right? So once again, thank you so much for this entry. It just is a great way to start off this last collection of website subscriber entries. So thanks so much for that. Now, on to entry number 2. All right, Gerard, this is looking great. Orchestrated just in the nick of time. Okay, yeah, because obviously if this is the last group of entries, then this came in just right at the end of the challenge period. All right, so let's talk about a few things here before we jump right into the evaluation criteria and so on. So you're probably anticipating that I'm going to be telling you that the harp is a little underpowered here. And yeah, I mean, if you were to have big rolling chords here, rather than these kind of smaller stacks of intervals, just really hand over hand kind of big rippling chords, then I think that there's a chance in here, and mark it fortissimo. Then I think that, considering that everything else is really not all that loud until you get to right here. Like once you get to here, and you're picking up a lot of power and clarinets and so on, and the melody continue on, the upper winds and the horns, mostly really the horns blasting away right in here. That really puts the harp at a disadvantage. but and also like the sense of white noise that occurs from a snare drum roll. So yeah, so try to try to just think about that. Otherwise, like I would just say, like the harp doesn't really have a lot to contribute to a passage like this unless you're doing like once again big rolls or big glissandos, or if there was a certain slot in the overall harmony, or the just all of the pitches stacked up together, if there was a place where the harp could sort of sit and play some kind of passage work, some kind of figuration, then that would be more useful. But there really doesn't exist, nothing like that really exists in this piece. Okay, now let's go straight to the evaluation criteria. I like the way that you start out here, just like the piano score, pitch weight in the upper middle register, but then you fill things out. You just get bigger and bigger. And that also helps to solve the second problem, which is thematic material repeating often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated exact same way twice. Well, like here, you're adding all this weight. You're adding trumpet right in there, doubling the yenta dun dun. You're adding horns. You're adding some more lower strings and so on. So I just feel that you're solving that problem. You're ticking that box really nicely. There's one little thing, just like one other little harmony point in here, or scoring point. If you have four horns, this really should be first and second, third and fourth, right? So the third horn is going to play the F sharp, and the second horn is going to be playing the octave, right? You want your octaves to stack up between your first and second horn. That's what they like to play together, right? They should always be getting the octaves. The third horn can play the F sharp in the middle. And then as to this could still be the second horn way below the first, and just keep the third playing that F sharp throughout, right? And then it still is better for this to be A and E on the first and second, and F sharp and C below with the third and fourth. They should interlock, right? Okay, all right. So now let's talk a little bit about the orchestration of the upper winds right in here. So you pretty much keep it the same, the same basic idea. Here you say pizzicato quasi chitarra. So like the thing about that is quasi chitarra, that there's like a couple different things that implies. One is that you have the instrument on the lap, right? And they're sort of plucking it like a guitar. And if that were so, there's also the other implication is that you're plucking back and forth, right? That would be really like a guitar going up and down and up and down. In which case I would completely approve of roll up arrow, roll down arrow, roll up arrow, and so on and so forth, right? But the thing about this is that you're going up arrow all the time, so there's absolutely no need to put in the up arrow, right? Unless you're saying like, well, it's like a guitar, but I don't want you to go back and forth. I want it to be all up arrow rolls. Okay, so I want people to roll to do the up arrow roll while they're holding it in their lap, right? And then I guess you would continue to hold it in the lap while you went pluck, 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 which is a little annoying, but yeah. So if that was the case, then I'll give you a pass on that. But otherwise, I would say, there's just a couple things that are a little unclear here. I would just assume that if it were being played in the lap, that you would be plucking up and then down and up and then down, which actually is a very exciting way to play, and it creates some variation, which is nice. All right, and then as to this other scoring right in here, that all works pretty nice, and you don't have anything else interfering, right? So it works out great. The octaves in the piccolo, flute, and English horn, and then sandwiched in between we've got the oboes. So this is not a G, right? What is it? It's an F double sharp, right? It's not G natural to G sharp. And yeah, so you think you would get like a cautionary on this if this were a G natural, right? Okay, but yeah, F double sharp. It's not a G. It's not functionally a G. It's functionally an F double sharp leading to a G sharp. All right. So we get to this place right in here. We got these E-fifths, sounding E-fifths being played by the horn, right? And then this is a D-fifth going back and so on. So that touch is really, really nice. And then I like that little added quality of the different instruments right in here. That's all really cool. Okay, so now we get to the next criteria, right? So melodic development soaring quite high to the uppermost orchestral registers. Accompaniment figures covering a wide range of pitches, wind registers if you're using wind, right? So that isn't an issue because you are sort of dividing it up rather nicely across your strings. But one thing that you do add that I really love are these viola trills right in here. And I kind of wonder, like, is there just some way of strengthening these a little bit? You know, could they be, like, if you added clarinet or something? Because I just feel this could easily get buried, especially if you have yours, like, you have so much dynamic mixing here. You've got forte on your melody, you've got piano for your horns, you've got like trumpets kind of honking away at these, or second trumpet honking away at mezzo forte, and then continuing on forte pizzicato. There's just some way of making the foreground and background a little bit more simple, right? Or I just feel that there's so much dynamic mixing here. You know, what if you were to bring everybody down to mezzo forte except for the horns, right? And the harp could be louder, right? So I'd say if you do that, then of course, like with a big, huge, generous rolls rather than just limiting it to right here, right? And then I think that the mezzo forte volume or dynamic of the viola would work great, especially doubled by clarinet. All right, then as for the treatment of the melody, so piccolo, I think that you need a little bit more support here because this is playing in the piccolo's sort of weaker register. So I would say absolutely continue, like just have the one or two flutes continue on doubling or tripling, as it were, this piccolo line. Yeah, but then you've got oboe, right? You've got I see what you're doing. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's all right. The oboe supporting the piccolo, that creates a really great bond, and taking the flute out of it does make it clearer. So disregard what I said before. It's fine. Just the way that this is done, and then coming in here with the flutes and playing the octaves in there. That's wonderfully simple. So I would just say, maybe, if you take everybody down to mezzo forte, have the horns play pianissimo, and I think that is better. Like as you might have seen in some other recent entries, when the horn creates a pad right in here, it subtracts from the excitement, from the vitality of the accompaniment figure, right? So just drop them way back, right? Just bring everybody down to mezzo forte, and have the horns play pianissimo, and then pushing a little bit. Like when everybody pushes, they can push too. And by golly, the strings should do the same thing, right? Why are they not getting louder? Pluck, 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 pluck. Right? Definitely should contribute. Especially if you got snare drum, going. All right. Now, on our next page, piccolo. I'd really love this. And once again, you have got the little stack here, the oboes, and the little trills here with the violas. Clarinets aren't doing anything. They could be helping out those violas. And it's all really secure. Working great. English horn and helping out right here. Violas and so on, and you're just bringing in the strings right here at the end so that they go straight to okay. There's one little problem with this, right? And that is like the way that this is scored, you are bringing in the strings so that the downbeat here is the beginning of the next phrase, but that's actually not what's happening. What is happening is that the second beat of this bar is the beginning of the next rhythmic phrase, right? It's and then the next rhythmic phrase starts on 2, right? Da da da, yeah da 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 da. right? 2, 3, 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1, right? So it's just, like Falla delineates the difference between those parts by having the piccolos rush all the way up to, they're having the right hand rush all the way up to the highest E on the piano and then dropping down an octave going forwards, right? So I'm not saying you have to change anything because, you have you have that high piccolo note and then things feel like they're dropping because you're cutting out the winds and then you're just continuing on with strings. But it's just something to think about, right? What if you did send your violins all the way up to that really high E, same as the piccolo, and then drop down here and then had them continue on, right? I feel that in some ways the scoring here to me, it just feels a little too separated, right? You've got all the function in the strings of the melody. You've got all the function of the harmony and the accompaniment in the brass, right? There's kind of no integration here. There's no doubling of the winds to sort of make the strings fuller and more complementary to the horns and trumpets. There is, in a sense, you could say that there is some melody in the trumpets because like this sounding E, right? This written F sharp sounding E, E. But then here it's just going to a G, da 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 da. I just feel this needs a little bit more work right in here to kind of bridge across the two so that it's more, there's more integration between the two functions. Not that anything doesn't work, but it's just, it just feels just slightly awkward, right? But this is all good. A little touch of English horn right in there. Yeah, just all completely perfectly functional. But what's the dynamic arc here, right? In the piano part, it's crescendo, molto marcato, and then diminuendo to, say, poco forte or mezzo forte or something, right? So, maybe you could reduce the volume I keep saying volume. Maybe you could reduce the dynamic. And start forte, and then crescendo, and then diminuendo to mezzo forte. Anyways, just some thoughts about how to approach that a little bit more like the Falla score. But here I am just like giving you one suggestion after another, but that doesn't mean in any way that that this isn't a fun piece of scoring and like it's totally playable, right? It's just like, how can you work out the balance in some better ways, and what are some possible ways of refining things so like your harp is a little bit more audible and so on and so forth, right? How to get a better balance and so on. What's the real meaning of playing like a guitar? So yeah. Anyways, but yeah, just I'm so happy that you were able to get this finished in the nick of time, Gerard. So like. Don't feel like like you shouldn't do that. Just go ahead and contribute any way you possibly can, because I'd like to get another score from you, especially for the upcoming 2022 orchestration challenge. I'm already thinking ahead to it. I picked the piece. It's completely different from anything we've done before, and yet it's not way out, but it's just a piece that may never have occurred to anybody to orchestrate, even if they've heard it at all, even though it is by a well-known composer. So I'm dropping another hint here, right? So with that, I will just thank you again, Gerard, for a great score, and let's go on to the next evaluation in this series. Hey there, Noel. This score has got guts. I just really love the power and the energy, and I love the big contrasts too. I think you need to underline them in some ways, right? You know, here you're going to piano. I think you could have gone to piano here as well. So yeah, so much fun. Okay. So we're going to talk about a few notation things in harp, and then we're going to get started into the evaluation criteria. All right, so just one little observation. Do you notice how it like sounds really kind of choppy, like that? You know, it really sounds like clunk, 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 right? And that is, I think, I have a theory about that, and it could possibly be because of the accented, like you have the same note, like you have a tied slur, excuse me, a tied grace note here of the same pitch, right? So you have to ask yourself, how does that make sense? Like you have a B tied to a B, so essentially it is a pitch that is continuing to go on, and yet you have an accent on both sides. So I think I've explained this, but just very, very briefly, the reason why there is an accent on the B in the piano score, and then there's an accent on the B grace note, and then on the B principal note, is because the B and the E are being hit really, really hard by the pinky and pointer, the fifth finger and second finger of the right hand, and then the thumb is being asked to hit right on the beat on the B, right? So accented B and E, grace note 2, tying, right? And then the B with the thumb. So that the accent is for the B on the thumb. It is not for the B above, right? But then you have to ask yourself, well, okay, well, let's say if I took away this accent, would it make sense? Well, why do we want to have a note come in early? Because that's essentially what you're asking when you have a tied grace note. You're just saying, you know, da 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 da, right? So I feel that is what's making things sound kind of choppy in your mock-up. Okay, so let's set all that aside. Let's talk about a couple other things. Notation in the horns. Here you're saying horns 1 and 3, 2 and 4, and yet you're scoring them. Excuse me. You're scoring them as if they were 1 and 2, 3 and 4, right? So the third horn would be doubling the first horn, both of them playing F sharp, and then the second and fourth would both be playing the D sharp. So even though you've written 1 and 3, 2 and 4, you're basically scoring 1, 2, 3, 4 in the proper way. So which I think is great. I prefer that. And the same thing here. Look, you've got the first and the second, the third and the fourth, right? The first and the third on the higher pitches, and the second and fourth on the lower pitches. Perfect. Makes perfect sense to me, right? I think it's great. Now, right in here, I was saying, oh yeah, no, you know, why don't you get softer right in here? And you're already thinking about the fact that the harp is so much weaker, right? So you're saying mezzo piano here, piano with your winds and brass, and hey, have the harp come in. So it doesn't matter, though. You know, it doesn't matter. I'm suddenly thinking of, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why they're dressed as a tiger. Have they got my leg? Sorry. It doesn't matter. You could have everybody playing piano in the orchestra, but the fact that everybody is playing is enough to drown out the harp, right? The harp is incredibly delicate, and you know it's kind of complicated by the fact that you've got pizzicato, you know, right in here, which is playing over similar pitches, maybe just right under or next to some of the pitches of the harp. Like, for instance, the same E here and the same B here. And so that is enough to basically swallow the sound of the harp, right? So the harp, it's either you have to bring everybody down to pianissimo and really lighten up the texture and not have pizzicato, and then you'll hear the harp, right? Same thing in here. Or just leave the harp out. Just throw in like big rolls and glissandos and other kinds of things that are incredibly obvious and easy to hear in bigger textures. All right, so those are my 3 notes for you. Now, let's talk about the evaluation criteria. You basically tick the box on the first one. You don't limit the pitch weight to the upper middle register of the piano or the orchestra, as it is in the piano score. Then the second issue is thematic material repeats often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated exactly the same way throughout. So in other words, are these first 4 bars orchestrated exactly the same as these 4 bars? And it's like really close. There are like you add a tuba note here, right? And you add some lower strings. But the thing is, it's so thick, it's so massive, right? In both sections that they really do sound essentially the same. So, is there a way of reimagining the beginning to sort of lighten it up even more than it is, right? So maybe take out the bottom end entirely. Maybe, back off, like just hold off on the cymbal, and just lighten up the texture slightly here in the brass and the winds, and then come back here exactly the way this is scored, with just a boom there on the timpani and a crash on the cymbal and everything else, right? So that might be one way of approaching this, just so that you progress the texture, right? So it isn't exactly the same thing twice, right? I've been telling my Patreon supporters who have supplied complete scores, what if this score were the version that gets played 100 times between now and 2050, right? Or what if there's just this big craze for this piece orchestrated, and your orchestration was the one that that was chosen for that role? Would you be happy with these 4 bars being exactly the same as these, right? Or nearly the same? So, just some thoughts about how to approach that. I would say that if you have like these big triple stops, like you're kind of adding you're adding a grace note to the triple stop already. But the thing is that you've made it really easy on the player by supplying an open string, right? So if it weren't for that open string, I would have some objections. But I think it's fine the way that it is. Yeah. So yeah, as to the orchestration of this, like you've got your flutes, oboes, you got your English horn really high, right? I mean, it will play fine, but I mean, this would be a much stronger note if it were just given to like an oboe, right? And you already got the flutes on that, right? So the English horn is actually at a disadvantage here with blending, right? And then you've got the clarinets higher than the flutes here, right? And then bassoons way below. So yeah, and then I was not even getting into the alto saxophone, also putting pressure on that note. So really, like there are so many people, there's so many instruments doubling that sounding G sharp that really it would be, and there are so few instruments playing the sounding B is being played by A2 clarinets. It really would be better if the flutes were supporting the clarinets, and you just you left what instruments you did have, like, 'cause you already got, like, you've got trumpets playing that G sharp and the B and so on. So I think it's a little out of balance the way that it's scored right in there. I love the baritone sax right in here. Yeah, I'm just sort of thinking about it. So you're asking for a G sharp, a written G sharp. Yeah, sounding down. Yeah, so that's all fine. Yep. Well, maybe now. Yeah, that's all good. Okay, so yeah, so it's really powerful, almost brutal scoring, right? And that's what you want. So it's working out great. Now, right in here, let's get into the next section, B, right? Which is it starts here and then it sort of progresses here thematically, right? So our two criteria to think about here are the melodic development soaring quite high, the accompaniment figures covering a wide range, and so on. So you interpret the accompaniment figures. We already discussed this a little bit. You're giving it to pizzicato middle strings and and harp here. The harp obviously is going to get swallowed up by the middle strings, as I mentioned before. This is really cool right in here. You've got this little counter melody going on under the, just so long as it doesn't get to be too loud. I think pushing it all the way up to forte is a little bit much, right? But yeah, and here you manage that leap upwards to D very nicely by just dropping down from A and having the oboes below. It's just perfect, almost textbook, right? If there were a textbook on this, on how to orchestrate this piece, this would fall right into it, right? And then here, you really, really, really double a lot of things in here. It might be just a little bit too much, right? It just really is, like, it's almost like you're getting massive too soon, right? Like, because we're headed towards something big, right? Yep, right? And then here you actually draw back, but the lead up to it is just enormous, even before the crescendo, right? And right in here, you're pushing piano to forte, right? And you're keeping the winds piano, and there kind of isn't any crescendo here. And then you have mezzo piano to forte in your strings. So, guess who wins the fight here? Brass, hands down. You barely hear the winds, and right in here, whatever they're doing in here is going to be lost as the brass pick up steam and just push into this. And yeah, keep in mind your trumpets are mezzo forte, right? So the balance here is just a little weird. So I think you need to work out a little bit more how it should go, right? So if you want to drop down to piano, that's great. I would say you don't really have to say, oh, well, if these guys are piano, this should be pianissimo. I think that's fine, just to have everybody be piano, right? And here you're saying, oh, strings may be a little bit louder. That's okay too. Shouldn't these pitches here not be tied but be quarter notes, right? The reason why they're tied in the mock-up in the template that I provided is because the left hand is playing this low note, and then it's playing this one with the second finger, and then it's coming back and hitting the same low note hard, which is represented by this E here, and then going forward and playing this upper note with the thumb, right? So it's tied because it's telling the player to keep holding the second finger down in the left hand. But since that issue is completely absent from orchestral players, this should just be simply expressed as a quarter note all the way through, wherever that appears, okay? All right, so I would say push forwards, like everybody should get, the dun 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 dun. Everybody should crescendo, right? Rather than just the like. I see what you're trying to do here. You're trying to sort of get some suspense out of the accompaniment figure, but the accompaniment figure can't get bigger than the melody. The melody has to be supreme here, or else we just sort of lose the sense of function of what it is all about, right? And you're trying to hold that together by having a mezzo forte trumpet all the way through, but why can't everybody else be mezzo forte in that case, so that they match what's going on in the trumpet, and the trumpet doesn't overshout all of the winds, which it easily can do, just a single trumpet, right? If this is first trumpet, right, then all of these players can play as much as they like at piano, and they're going to just still get overwhelmed by the trumpet, that one trumpet player in there. But otherwise, in principle, I don't really object to this kind of mass of players, just so long as the balance is right between the accompaniment and the melody. And then, rushing up here, it's like all heavy brass and winds, and just this kind of marking time right in here from the I guess you could say lower winds, the alto sax, baritone sax, and so on. Look, I think that, I understand the whole desire to put the saxophones at the bottom, but whatever the bracket, whatever the left bracket is, the big heavy bracket should be the same as the bar line, right? So I would say have the heavy bracket go all the way down to here, and then just have like this little brace, have the little additional brace on the saxophones, and that is fine, right? And if you really want to differentiate them here with the bracket, differentiate them also by not having the bar line be continuous, but just have a break here in the bar line, and that's also fine, right? There are scores like that. That's totally cool if you really want the differentiation. I would just prefer like one solid bracket here and a little brace, and I think that would be, or sub bracket is the more proper word. This is a brace. So yeah, just a big, I would say one big generous bracket and a little sub bracket there, and you've got it. All right, and that takes us to okay, so the problem here is that you've got you got these, you've got this, energetic. It's soft. It's softly scored, but it's still kind of energetic, and you'll pick up energy just playing the glissando here, right? So it's soft, and yet it's richly scored right in here. And the problem here is that you got piccolo on top, but it's heading down into like kind of a weak area. So it really should be, the flute should start off higher, right? So I think that the flute should be playing up here, not doubling the oboe, right? So just have the flute doubling the piccolo line all the way down to here, and you can just, with the way that this is scored, you can keep the piccolo in the game, right? That's fine. It's just kind of strange. I'm seeing, this is another instance of me seeing the dynamics start like a bar and a half or a bar before the actual music to be played. I wonder if that is something in the notation application you're using. All right, and then here, this is just really, really powerful scoring. A nice little transition right there on the horns and so on. So yeah, once again, like the harp just doesn't have a chance. Like if the harp was doing glissandos back and forth during this part, you could hear it, right? If the harp started with a big, huge roll, you could hear it. But in terms of the other definition of the word roll, does not really play a role in here that you could hear with the way you got it scored. Now, if everybody played really softly, like if you started off pianissimo and the harp playing like little patterns on top descending along with it, like maybe an octave or two above, then you could hear the harp really nicely. But still, I really love the spirit of what you're doing right in here. Don't take my critiques to be like negative at all. I'm just trying to figure out a way to make what you've scored here work really, really well, right? So what advice can I give you to make this leap off of the page into the audience's ear if and when an orchestra sits down to play it, right? That's my only interest. So in that regard, most of what you've scored here is pretty workable, I'd say. It just needs a bit of polishing, a little of adjusting, and so on and so forth. Maybe some balancing, maybe a little bit of reinterpretation of one part or another. Okay, so I think it's pretty strong. So thanks so much, Noel, for sending this in. And I know it was probably like last minute, and you might have worked on it a lot and just still not felt happy about it, or maybe it just was all done in about 20 minutes or something, or but it does look like you worked on it quite a bit, so I'm not assuming anything, or I think that it shows some good work, some good solid work, so thanks so much for that, and I really appreciate it. And and thanks so much, like you've been making lots of really cool comments on other people's entries, and that really is hugely appreciated, along with your score. So thanks for all of it. I really appreciate it. Now, on to our next entry. We're getting down to the last two entries for this entire challenge. I'm getting real excited about it. So let's not waste any time. Here we go. That's actually a really cool score, Alexandre. You were worried about this being like maybe too much of a beginner score, or you know, you were actually willing to let it slide when we got down to the very very end of evaluations. But I'm really glad that we were able to include this. Kind of, it was originally a last minute entry, and then once again last minute trying to recover the score when I found that I didn't have the PDF. So it's all the same. It's really a fun score. There's a lot of really cool things to it, and I think that in the process of going over some of this orchestration with you, I think I'll be able to lead you to a stronger approach as an orchestrator. Right? That is the hope, and I'm sure will be the reality after we've had a chance to look at it. Because you know, the overall plans that you have here are not so bad, right? It's just how to make them real, right? How, you know, realizing what instruments balance in what way, and you know, what would you have to sacrifice in order to get one effect or the other. So let's talk about a few notation things and a few general realities with some of your scoring here. Okay, so right in here, instead of having an ottava mark over a bass clef in a grand staff instrument, why not just go to a treble clef here, right? Then this C fifth here would be written just the same as it would be in the treble clef here. And you can even put some of these notes in this staff if you want to. Harpists can read two-voiced music just as well as any keyboard player. The whole question is like whether or not this is audible scoring, and the scope of it. You know, if these parts are, generally speaking, are fairly soft, then there's kind of no reason why you couldn't hear the harp, or the celesta for that matter. Now, you shouldn't do this, like have a trill at mezzo piano in the left hand and forte in the right hand and so on. You just try to have have it be the same dynamic in both hands, and to and aim for a louder dynamic in both your harp and your celesta by 1 or 2 degrees louder than your strings. Okay, and even at that, if your strings go up to mezzo forte, if any instrument goes up to mezzo forte, it will basically start to bury the celesta. And up to forte, then the harp has a real hard time competing with the sound picture around it. Assuming that you want to go up to mezzo forte here, like the strings, then it will be very difficult for that celesta to be heard. And that would also include the harp as well. When you use the harp to double other instruments, and the celesta too, just kind of double other functions, the other functions will easily swallow up what the harp or celesta are doing. So it's better to use the harp and celesta in ways that are unique to it, that functions that are more to do with filigree or decoration, and to sort of suppress the volume of the rest of the orchestra a little bit, so that those beautiful, elegant qualities can be heard. Now, there's another thing about both harp and celesta, and that is that the lower timbres of these instruments tend to be pretty weak. And there are some celestas that are made that have like the 5th octave going down below C, below middle C. But, have you heard those sounds? Not on your mock-up, but have you heard them in real life? There's kind of a thunking quality. Like, the higher you get with the celesta sound, the more tinkly it is. But as you get lower and lower, it's more thunka, 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 and it doesn't really have that it doesn't have that beautiful, glistening quality. If you want more of the bell-like quality in lower pitches like this, then it's better to give them to vibraphone, because the vibraphone has a beautiful, clear, crystalline sound all the way down below middle C. But yeah, like right in here, there are a lot of celestas that could not play these notes. Keeping in mind that a celesta is a transposing instrument that sounds an octave higher, and it's the written note of C below middle C is actually middle C in concert pitch, right? Okay, so one last little thing, and that is actually two things. Besides actually three things, you do not need ottava on your flute and string parts. Okay. Another thing is here you're going, da 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 da, is kind of what you want, right? You want that unmeasured tremolo. But I think that the actual, at the speed that you're going, even at this slower speed of 120 to the quarter note, it probably should have been 180 to the quarter note. If you wanted to get up to the dotted half note equals 60, quarter note should equal 180, right? Okay, so, but if you want to get up to that higher tempo, then these really should be a single tremolo beam, not a double tremolo beam, right? So it should be like yada da 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 da. And if that's what you intended, then that's fine. So just take off one of these beams, just have it be a single tremolo beam, because can you fit in more than that at that speed? Okay, now the last little thing before we start to analyze the orchestration here is that you have these little sharp signs above the trill. So you're trilling from B to C sharp. And it's a little unclear what you mean when you have an octave, right? If it was intended to be one of these things where the player is playing non-divisi and just trilling the upper pitch, then I don't know. I mean, I still would want to have. I kind of would want to have two separate voices so that the player was really clear on which pitch was being trilled. Not, that you weren't attempting an octave trill, but just the trill on the top note. And there's another place where it's kind of unclear as well. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, right in here. So is this meant to be a trill of the B and the E, or just the E? And the other thing, too, is you're introducing an F sharp here on your trill, and you have an F natural in other scoring. In the same way that you have B and C sharp, right, is the trill, and then you have other notes that are being played as C natural, right? So which is it? Is it C natural, or is it C sharp? Or do you intend both? So if you intend both, then you have to, sort of give us some kind of clue that, like I would almost say, like, any C naturals that you scored after you had these sharp trills, then you would kind of want to put have to have a C natural with parentheses around it just to say, yes, I really, really mean this to be C natural here, and not C sharp as we heard in the trills in these other instruments. Yeah, and there was this one other thing too. So here you're going B, C sharp B, B, C sharp B, B, C sharp B, and here you're going B, C, B, B, C, B, B, C, B. So which one is it, right? So you might have just not worked out you might have not included all the C sharps, but even if you do intend for these pitches to be C sharps and for these pitches to be C sharps and so on, then you really have to have some kind of indication that these really are C naturals and mark them as such. Okay. So, with all of that out of the way, now let's talk about the evaluation criteria. Okay, and really looking forward to this. And let me just dial this up. Here we go. And get everything in position. Okay, so first concern, pitch weight in the upper middle register of the piano. Not a big deal in your score because you are stretching out amongst you're basically undertaking different orchestral scopes, and from big to small to very big to a little smaller to small to big and so on. So you really are mixing up the different timbral scope, right? So that's fine. The next concern, thematic material repeats often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated the same way throughout. That's also not a problem because you are undertaking different approaches with different instruments in whenever things repeat, right? That you really are mixing things up. So Let's talk about the orchestration right in here. How much does it work? I like the fact that you're scooping up from an E to a B rather than repeating the B note, which so I think it just works a whole lot better. And then here you're going C down to B, so we're not falling into that trap of going B B B B B B B B or B tie right on the grace note. So you're just going dum dum bum dun 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 dun. That's very cool. And with the oboes below by a fifth, this all works really nicely. And then you've got the clarinets providing the B octave, and you've got the English horn on a B below that, right? So who is, and then here we've got octave Bs. I'll talk about this in a minute. So who is providing the mediant, right? Is just your third trumpet. So I would say if there's any way to have one of these instruments, to maybe one of your oboes could be playing this and the other oboe could be providing the G sharp, right? Or perhaps your first clarinet and your first oboe could be providing the G sharp and the second instruments could be playing the other parts, right? So we just need that G sharp because it's really not coming through anything except for right here and then kind of almost invisibly in the celesta. So as before, here you're having the left hand of the celesta doubling the oboe part, right, transposing by the octave, and then this is sort of doubling what's going on with the flute and so on. So this really does not have enough power to compete with or to contribute when you've got trumpets and trombones going on at the same time. The celesta is an exquisitely delicate instrument, right? It's like a feather of down, right? And what is the rest of the orchestra like in a passage like this? It is like a fan being placed on its back and blowing up into the air. So just try putting a little tiny feather of down on top of that fan and seeing if it stays there. It won't. It'll just get blown away. And the same thing is true of the celesta. Now, I'm sure that you've heard me talk about other passages where, the scoring was fairly strong and then you had the harp come in and the harp was kind of invisible and so on. So I think that the same thing is true here. Even though you say forte piano and then you say forte here, so right at the same time that these pitches are played, they are sort of barked out of existence by the downbeat with the brass, and then the forte of the winds and strings, the ongoing forte, and then you come back to forte here with your trumpets, A3, really powerful, and that is so penetrating that nothing can really compete with it or contribute, right? So like the clarinets, A2 clarinets in here, really are kind of useless. So right here, I would bring the A2 down to the top. It almost looks as if you're saying that the English horn is A2, right? Which I'm sure you don't mean that. So really try to bring it down to the top of the staff, right? Don't have it be quite so high. I don't know, is this Dorico? There should be, I think Sibelius has a default where technique text is only, maybe one space, one staff line's height above the staff. So that's so just watch out when you start getting closely spaced here. Just these objects need to be dragged back down and so on. Now here, you wouldn't need to say A2 with your bassoons because we have two pitches, right? So this is completely unnecessary. And don't use a capital A. Just lowercase a is fine. So wherever you have intervals, it's obvious that it's two instruments in brass and winds. Now here we have the problem that of sort of pairing up the instruments. So let's talk about that really quickly. Then I'll go back to talking about the orchestration. So if this is 1 and 2 and this is 3 and 4, then this should be an F sharp octave and this should be the same F sharp octave, right? Because the pairs of instruments play octaves together better, right, than playing the same pitch together. So if you have a situation like this, just give each pair an octave because the first and the second are used to playing octaves together. And then if you have a high note, that's better to be doubled by the third horn rather than the second horn. And then of course the the fourth horn would be partnering the third below, right? And then here you have kind of like, I would say the same thing. So this should be B thirds with both, B thirds in both parts, right? Okay. Now, right in here, this could be first and second horn. This could be third and fourth horn. That's fine. But right in here, I would actually give this to the first and third. And the same thing in here. If you're going to go above the staff, shouldn't this be? This is weird. Bum 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 bum. Right. So we've got the E natural, and then we should have a B natural here, right? Which would be. So I guess you're just throwing in some harmony here or something. Okay. All right. It's just a little strange the way that that's expressed. A flat. See, I wouldn't use A flat to harmonize with a B. I would use a G sharp, right? So in a G sharp, transpose should be a D sharp here, right? And then if you want to go to just a standard G to harmonize with the C, then that would be D natural, right? So this should be D sharp, D natural. Okay. Yeah, sounding G sharp and then G natural. Yeah, so third and fourth, first and third horn on this, and then So I mean, if you're thinking of this as 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, that's fine, but it that also works fine. But it's a little the problem with scoring that way is it sort of leads you into kind of bad habits about how the pairs of horns work together, and all of the opportunities of 1 and 2 to work together beautifully are kind of erased. All right, so back to the orchestration. So this is fine, but what I would say is if you're going to use so much trumpets right in here, trumpets and trombones, then really the winds should all be scored way higher, right, to get out of the way of these trumpets, which will kind of blow them away a bit. And the same thing is true of the violins and violas. You could just put the violas up way higher or drop them down lower to support the bass, right? But just get them out of the way in one way or another so that the brass can reign supreme in their own territory. Now here you go to horns going arf, 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 supported by trumpets and so on, bum, 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 and you have like A2 oboes kind of jumping in there to play a few notes. And I would say like here, you can mark this piano, and you could even mark the oboes mezzo forte, but they're still not contributing very much. I would possibly, if there is a way to rescore this so that maybe one of the horn players covers this, or two horn players cover this, right? You could have these pitches played by 1 and 2, and then you could have these pitches played by the third, right? For instance, that would be one way of dealing with it. And now, looking at the kind of mirror universe over here, once again, the celesta scoring is very low, right? And it really will not come through very clearly. This is more of a vibraphone part, judging by the balance with the rest of the orchestra, right? And if you want clearer, low pitches, then vibraphone is the way to go in a place like this. Then here you got trill on on a piccolo, and then on the same pitches, byom, 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 byom. And you have the same thing going on here with the oboes and the second clarinets. See, so it's really unclear here. Like, do you intend both pitches to be trilling? Do you intend, just the top pitch to trill? It's very unclear. I would break this into two separate voices, and I would mark trill for each of them. In fact, I would even just break this into two separate staves, just to be completely clear. It's funny, but in some romantic scoring, late romantic scoring, the clarinets are always divided into two separate staves, even if they do exactly the same thing for bars and bars and bars, just because they were, they were the first, I would say, the second was used in so many ways as a support instrument for the wind section, and the first was used in so many ways as a soloist that it was just kind of assumed that you might as well just score them separately, even if they played a lot of unison. Okay. Yeah, so, and I think, yeah, just once again, you need to make it clear whether or not you intend these to be octave trills. If they're octave trills, they should be divisi. If you just intend the top to be trilled, you could score it in two separate voices, but then say non-divisi, right? So that the player knows, okay, the bottom one isn't supposed to be trilled, the top one. I mean, usually, in a case like this, it really will be just the top one that is trilled, but, the way that it's scored, you're really asking, in both of these parts, you're really asking for raised hands at rehearsal. Or, from the copyist, right? The copyist will say, what's going on here before, or if you do your own copying, then watch out. You'll find some things in here that you'll say, oh, geez, I need to go back and fix that in the main score. Right, and then bum, 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 bum. Kind of cool. All right, and then the oboes and clarinets. Byum, byum, byum. And once again, we're kind of not getting a mediant in there, right? Where's the G sharp? Right, I'm not quite seeing it. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about the B section. So B1 and B2, right? So in our B section, we have to think about melodic development soaring quite high to the uppermost orchestral register. If you're doing if you're scoring it exactly the way on the same exact pitches. And then the accompaniment figures covering a very wide range if they're to be scored onto a woodwind, sort of crossing wind registers and so on. Okay, so here you got pizzicato and bassoons and staccato celesta. So a staccato is not really you can get a staccato from a celesta, but it is already a really soft instrument, and it's staccato and celesta just involves using a lot of kind of feathered pedal to just as soon as you play it, you just kind of let go, or you don't pedal at all, right? And you just kind of doink doink doink, and it is just kind of it just really doesn't have much of a sound. But at least you didn't use harp here, right? So using harp would be worse because the sound of the pizzicato would be completely absorb, right? So here essentially, let's just forget about the celesta. Essentially, you've got pizzicato and bassoons working, pizzicato, violas, and bassoons in unison, and that's a really, really good combination. And then here, you drop in a horn to double the bassoons when the violas drop out. But it's kind of interesting. Right in here, speaking of dropping out, you go ya da 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 da, or you go rest da 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 da, drop out. Right? So what's going on here? Do you need these instruments to crescendo and then suddenly disappear? Right? The horn right in here, I would actually mark this pianissimo, but still double it, right? So A2 right in here. Yeah, because otherwise they'll really, it'll be really, even softly, it'll be very strong here with the bassoon, but you can still mark a crescendo. All right. I like that. All right, and even going all the way up to that high D, the violinists do not need your ottavo sign right here. Okay, just leave it out. And here you're rushing up to there. I would end on the A. Yep, bum 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 A. Dun 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 A. Right? And then actually the flutes could go on and join, play the same pitches as the oboe. So it should just drop down to the D, and then it'll actually sound as if they're continuing on above, doubling the piccolo, just because of the trick of the reinforcement of the harmonic overtones here. Especially joining the oboes and the flutes together. And, clarinet piling on as well. Yeah, I'm just kind of not sure, why, if we're just going to drop out right here with the English horn, why do we need it at all, right? It's I mean, here it's the viola is doubling what's going on, but then there's nothing going on. So I would just say, like, I just feel that there needs to be some continuity. Either leave this voice out, and just have your viola player continue to double the bassoon and leave out the horn, or make it go all the way, okay, along with your violas and cellos too, an octave lower. All right, and then to jump to the section B2. Okay, so now right in here, I think you have a real problem, and that is that you don't have the melody at all, right? We don't have the dun 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 part, right? But we have dun 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 dun, right? So maybe that was a conscious choice, but like, if this were going to be a celesta solo, it should be an octave higher. If there was some way of kind of reinterpreting it, then I understand. But there needs to be, the celesta just needs to be higher or louder or, more discreetly accompanied or whatever. English horn entrance, right, up against celesta, and the horn below, pianissimo, piano, mezzo forte, right? That's the only way you're going to get a balance in there. And then what's the pitch, or excuse me, what's the volume or dynamic here, right? How loud is this? You said forte back here. So is this still forte? Is this piano, right? Was the last I heard was piano. And then bass clarinet has never been in this music before. So why is, what is going, and why does it have two voice, why does it have two voice scoring in here with the rest? This is probably from copy pasting from the piano score. So I'm not beating up on you here. Or maybe copy pasting from the trumpet score. Anyway, yeah, okay, so and then you don't need the ottava, rushing up to the A and then just letting that take over. Why did the clarinets poop out though? Like, why? And then why is there no E at the end of this, right? You should come to the, like, if you're going to punch this with so much force from your brass section, then I think you just really need a sense of completion here, and especially if you have harmonization from below, from A2 trumpets, A2 horns, right? So I think you should rush up to, I see you want to have harmony, you want this to be melodic and then harmonic. Could this be like the second clarinet covering the C sharp and then the English horn covering the D, written as an A above the staff, and then allowing your first player to go all the way up to the sounding E, written F sharp? And then same thing here. Could you go bum 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 and then drop down octave da da dun, right? And then you got your oboe octaves here, and yeah. So I mean, this is actually kind of cool. I like this part right in here, and the concern in the evaluation criteria is there a textural contrast to the previous passages? Is it enough so that it doesn't feel relentless? And I feel that nothing in this feels relentless because you change things around in so many ways. That's one of those things that tends to make these evaluations longer. If there are just like lots of different changes, then I have to kind of tackle each one a little bit. So here you have the problem of kind of raucous horn scoring here, and a celesta that just cannot cope. And then of course the same thing going on with a harp. It just cannot, it cannot really contribute very much. Right in here, not so bad, but maybe if you did something with the harp that wasn't just exactly doubling what was going on in the other instruments, like big rolled chords, right? That would stand out and be different enough to where what the function of the harp was doing wasn't being absorbed. Okay, but I mean, I like this. I like the doubling of the... Okay, so just being really aware right here that this is the softest register of the piccolo, and it's really not, so this is kind of, everybody's like, here, this can be a forte register. This is sort of a mezzo forte register. This is kind of a mezzo piano at best register, and this is like a piano to pianissimo register, right? So it's really not balanced very well against your strings. All right, and then kind of just one last little reference back here. You have this kind of da da da, so you end up playing A sharp twice. Da 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 da. But you know who should really take the lead here and lead the orchestra is the first violins, right? So here, that's great. But here, why are the seconds doing the first's job, right? This is what the firsts are good at. Let them do it, right? And let them end on an A. All right, and this is all fun right in here. You've got the yeah dun 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 dun, and all pretty good. Nothing too weird. Yeah, yeah, that's all good. And I can see this leading towards kind of like a big, massive arrangement of section B. And you are maintaining the driving staccato in here. So that, that kind of ticks the box for me. All right, Alexandre. It was really not bad at all. I mean, you were worried that this would be, not worth looking at. And it really was worth looking at. I really enjoyed taking a look at it, and I think we shouldn't stop here. I think you should definitely think, improve your orchestration skills, keep working on it. You gave me a little background about what you're doing musically nowadays, and I think that sounds great. So look, just continue to focus on that, continue to work on different orchestrations and different, setting your own challenges for yourself, and then come back in a year and try out the 2022 orchestration challenge, because that might be more up your alley. There's something about this work that every single one of these works, whether it was the Bartok or the Lili Boulanger or the Mussorgsky or this Manuel de Falla, there's something about it that's just very personal to each composer, and yet has I've seen so much different variation and so many examples of each orchestrator making it personal for them, right? Like finding something of their own personality in it. And I really get that sense that what I'm going to offer next year will be even more familiar ground for you, and something where you can find your own voice as an orchestrator. Okay? So thanks very much. And with that, let's go on to the last evaluation for this entire series of 2021 Orchestration Challenge website subscriber evaluations. Prasad, there's a lot of really great stuff in what you scored. The question is like really kind of turning it into an orchestral work rather than just a kind of series of sketches. Some things like worked terrifically well. And other parts are not really balancing so well, and it really is more just kind of little, kind of sections rather than it doesn't feel like one coherent or one coherent. It feels coherent, but it doesn't feel like one cohesive narrative all the way through. Just more like different experiments, and that's actually a really great way to approach this. Taking apart different sections of the original material and just experimenting with them and trying out different approaches and so on. So as far as that's concerned, this is actually pretty good, and it's a really good exploration of different kinds of orchestration. So I'm going to run through this really quickly, just in terms of the first few evaluation criteria. It pretty much ticks a lot of boxes. You don't limit yourself to exactly the same notes as the piano score. You deal with things like repetition of material in a very interesting way. You handle the melodic development soaring pretty high. You've got a interesting approach to the accompaniment figures and so on. So I'll cover some of that as I go, but first let's just kind of look at what's workable. Here you've got flutes in a fairly weak register, and the same thing is true of the piccolo. And you've got those same notes being doubled by solo clarinet here, and then you've got bass clarinet down below and bassoons and so on. So the weight of this is really like an octave lower than it's originally scored, and more, right? A lot of weight on this lower G sharp. You've got solo clarinet plus A2 flutes, and the thing is that, yeah, just like I was saying, that the flutes are pretty weak right in here. It would have been better for you to not use flute and just allowed the clarinet to be a solo instrument, and then had the A2 flutes play this part, not this part, but sounding an octave higher here, and you could double that with piccolo or not, right? It doesn't really matter because the piccolo is going to be so weak right in here compared to the other instruments. Now here, you trade off to brass, and once again, you keep it really low. You have your everything's scaled an octave lower and more. And then, see, here the problem is that you are really cranking the horn right in here. You're saying mezzo forte to try to balance with forte with the oboe, but that's still, you still have A2 horns, and the horns are going to be more than twice as loud as the oboe, at least in projection, right? So that projection is going to overwhelm the sound of the oboe an octave above. Now, right in here, bum 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 bum. It's still the oboe has to fight with the horns. The only way for the oboe to be able to be heard right in here would really be if the horns were scored about like maybe mezzo piano or even piano, right? And then you would hear the oboe very clearly above them. Now, here you're trading off from oboe to piccolo, but keep in mind that you're heading down to this B, but then the piccolo comes in at the B sounding an octave above, right? So it really is ya da 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 da. Oh, sorry. Ya da 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 ba 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 ba. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't really trade off on the same notes, but I mean, if you're satisfied with that, that's fine. And yeah, like here you're using oboe, like you're immediately using the instrument that you just used as a solo as an accompaniment. So it's very, very easy for the ear to be distracted by that. And here, once again, you're using flutes in their very weakest register right in here. This will have a hard time making itself be heard over the oboe in general, right? And if it weren't for the fact that you already have tuba and trumpet right in there, that will just obliterate what's going on in the flute. Although the oboe has got some chance in there. It really would have been better for this to be scored on clarinets, right? A2 clarinets. And then you could throw in these accented notes on English horn, right? The English horn, I mean, it's such a similar timbre, right? So where does the solo begin and end? We have the double reed timbre just suddenly turning into a accompaniment instrument, while the piccolo starts off in a weaker register and then goes like could you have started with flute doubling on this? So it would have been piccolo and flutes A2, and then maybe jumping down an octave for these two high notes and then rejoining. And then here you got the trumpet, and you're sending your trumpet all the way up to high D. So if you just really have to have this, okay, so C trumpet, how much of each, right? Here we say flutes 1 and 2, clarinet, bass clarinet. So I'm assuming these are single instruments, but here you say C trumpet, but you have two players. So it's got me a little confused. Okay, but yeah, I mean, that high D is technically possible to play, but it's really not a note that concert players would like to play. I would say if you really have to have this line, then this should be scored for E-flat trumpet, and you should have trumpets 1 and 2 in C, and then have an extra E-flat trumpet part that has this really high part in it, okay? This real high playing in it. All right, and now you come back around to the main theme again, and yeah, so you got this da 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 da. Okay, so the problem here is that you have a big stack of B's sounding, right? So you have this is all B in the staff. This is B below the staff and B below that, right? So it's a triple octave that you've scored here. And the only thing that you've got in here are the cellos. So this is just a kind of a weak combination. There needs to be more weight on the G sharp, right? Maybe you could add the violas an octave higher playing the same notes inside the the first horn and the first and second violins, just right below it. That could help to supplement for the weakness, right? And then it's kind of strange, like you yum yum yum, and then you just suddenly throw in these G sharps in the trombone and tuba. So did you intend for these to be actually playing before, right? Maybe you left it out and you put it in here, and I don't know. Just see, that would help to fill in some of the weakness there. All right, and bum 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 bum. Yeah. Okay, so here I would support the strings right in here, even though it's fairly thick here with both sets of violins. In the abbreviations here, it should say violins 1, violin 2, or you could have violins in the middle and say 1 and 2, or you could just say 1 and 2 without saying violins. All right, but we do need to tell the difference between 1 and 2 here very quickly by eye. And in fact, the whole layout of the score is problematic here. There should be a bracket that covers all of the winds up down to here, and then the bar line should follow all of the winds. And then here, the same thing for the brass, should all have one bracket with the bar lines being the same length. And then for the strings, same thing. Now, here in the percussion, sometimes the bar lines are divided in different ways depending on how the instruments are scored. I would try to have the cymbals on like here you have two different pitches for your cymbals. I'd try to have all the cymbals to be on one line and have them all under the same bar line, but the timpani can be separated from them. It does not have to be. It might be under the same bracket, but it can have its own individual bar line. Okay, so continuing forward. The bassoon and so we're missing abbreviations here. This would be bass clarinet. Bum 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 with I mean that's kind of fun. I mean I love the sense of playfulness here. Don't get me wrong. It's just a question of what works and what doesn't, right? Now here we're getting into the second. It's like a mirror of this part right in here. First violins, with triangle, and this should just be a quarter note. The only reason why it's tied is because of the finger, the way that the fingers are scored in the left-hand part. The Falla wants the pianist to hold this note down with the second finger and then hit this again very, very hard with the little finger of the left hand. So that's why he's putting in the tie. He's saying, hey, don't let go of this. Just hold on to it and then hit this hard. And then play this with your thumb. So you don't need, since that isn't happening for the violas, this can just be a quarter note. Same thing here. All right. So, this all bounces. And then here you go. Bum 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 bum. All right, so once the trombone comes in here, all bets are off, right? It's a nice combination with the bassoon, but it will really overwhelm the bassoon. So it's not all that balanced, but it's a nice color. Why is there no cello in here? Now I cut off in your screen view the double basses are cut off here, but they don't play anything. That's why I just wanted to make everything slightly larger so it's readable. just partially because of the confusion, any visual confusion that might arise from the fact that there are not standard bar lines for each section. So anyways, yeah, I would just feel that if you're going to come up with this much power, you should add cellos to sort of even out the texture right in here. I'm not sure why the trombones don't finish on this E. Okay, so all of this celesta is going to be invisible. I mean, you can hear that in the mock-up. It's just really not audible. And then here you have these sort of middle functioning parts played at the top, right? These, if you look at the piano score, this part, just similar to this and so on, is played under the melody, right? So here you've got the melody played, solo trumpet, which is going to drown out the violins to a bit, but it's still not fatal. But just the power of the trumpet right in here is going to, it's going to drown this out, and it's also, it's just like the function is very unclear when it is above the melody, right? A lot of the stuff in this, a lot of the architecture of the harmony in this score depends on the melody note being on top, and then the meaning of the harmonic functions underneath become very, very clear. When you flip that and you put them on top, it just, is like, is this the melody? What's this? Is this just like sort of an E that's kind of playing along for the fun of it? But really the melody here is E, C, B, right? But that isn't, we know that is not the melody, right? It's E, F, da, 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 bum, 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 right? We know that's the, so it's just, if you could hear this, which you can't, but if you could hear this, it would be messing with your sense of how the melody is working. And some people did invert certain parts in certain ways, it's similar to this, and found new meanings and new kinds of approaches and so on. But sometimes it doesn't work. Like, I feel that in this section, inverting the functions is problematic. Okay. All right. Then bum 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 bum. And I really love the trading off that goes on in here. So piccolo, and see, like, this is a really nice strong way to score the flute plus the piccolo. Okay. The problem though is that you've got your second flute so low that it's essentially going to be devoured by what's going on in the other instruments. I think you wanted to score something in here that would double the viola part, but the instrument for that is clarinet, right? You wanted that cooler kind of a sound, doubling the viola. I understand that impulse. That's a very, very neat idea. However, it is just not really feasible for the flute player who will be, who's already has to deal with the trumpet part being higher and the horn underneath that even. All right, so there's this big mass of sound. The second flute will just get devoured right in the middle there. And the violas will also have a hard enough time as it is. You might as well double them with an instrument that can be heard, like English horn or clarinet. I would say clarinet is probably the best choice in this situation because of the tone color that you want to get here. And I see, you're trying to balance things. You're saying, oh, mezzo piano, mezzo forte, and these players are playing forte, but you're still putting the first trumpet near the top of its range, right? Okay. All right. So, and then you're trading off to oboe, English horn, clarinet family, and you're sending your horn way down low there, and I mean that's all playable, but it's just not it's not the clearest. It's like if you really wanted this to come off sounding very simple, that's a tuba line, right? If you want the kind of horn sound, you could easily ask the tuba player to be handling this with a lot more dexterity. However, you do have A2 horns, right? So if you had four horns, it would be more of a case where this could be played by the first and third, and this could be played by the second and fourth. So I'm not saying that it's impossible to do or anything, but it still is you know, there are other low brass instruments that can play this in a way that is more secure. Like I don't feel like you've justified the reason for why this this should be played on horns rather than tuba or bass trombone. But I mean, I can see the motion across the score, like you're saying, oh, well, using these people, then these people, then these people, and getting lower each time. That's fine, except don't forget that horns are a mid-range brass instrument, not a low-range brass instrument. They just happen to be positioned over the trumpets because they have a certain relationship to the winds, and that's where they were from the very beginning. Okay, going to the seconds. Yeah. I mean, like right here, you're getting so much mass into the sound that it might be better to have this with both sets of violins. And then continuing onwards, like you're getting lower now, clarinets and bassoons, bass clarinet and trumpet going lower with trombones coming in. Cellos and double basses. See, okay, so some of the problems with this scoring is that you're throwing in the harmony part. So, like here we have a melody part, and here we have a part that's sort of harmonizing below. Let's call it the bass part. Okay, so we have the melody part, we have the bass line coming through here, and you are putting the melody line down an octave to where it clashes inside of the bass part being played by the trombone, which is a much louder instrument, right? And so you've got the cellos and the bassoons playing right on top of the trombones. So we don't have, like, you're just running them together, right? So I think that you just need more separation there. I don't think you should be putting the you know, I don't think you should be stacking them in ways that overlap. All right. Okay, and then here you get very low with the melody, bass trombone and bassoons in octaves, and then once again, you see you're overlapping. You've got the bass part on top of the melody. So I just feel like that's problematic. It's better to have a separation, and that I think that would work more proportionally. But I love the effects that you get in this. It's, you know, you can sort of I can hear the excitement that you've got, and it's really a shame that because of the whole pace of this orchestration challenge that I could not get to these scores earlier. But I mean, I have to tell you folks that 10 weeks in which to create 100 hours of content, you know, that is just a grueling pace. And I mean, you might think, well, you know, 10 weeks, that's like 100 days. And, you know, or it's not 100 days, it's 70 days. Well, you know, I mean, you might think, well, you know, that's just, you know, you're doing an hour or two a day of stuff, but it's more than that. I study each score. I look things over. I have to give myself, you know, a day off occasionally. You know, it is a lot of work. So it's just you know, people who submit their scores at the beginning of the challenge will have them looked at and have a release for their video within about 6 weeks, right? People who do it at the end, it's about 10 weeks. So that's all I'm saying. So I'm sorry that it just becomes such a drawn-out process. But anyways, Prasad, it's a really fun score. So think about some of those things that I talked about, you know, just not having your, like, for instance, just some simple stuff like not having your bass part, like right here in the tuba, collide with or overlap your melody part and so on. Watch out about swapping functions vertically and so on. But there are some really impressive effects in here and some really fun things. So please, like, watch a lot of the different evaluations, see some of the ideas that they had, you know, from people who are very experienced or to people who are just starting out. And, everybody's got something of their own to say, and that is what's so fun about this. So here we are at the very end of this process, and I just want to say thank you to all the website subscribers. I just sent out a newsletter today announcing tomorrow's actually the event is going to be today when this is released. So please join me. It might actually be in session by the time you watch this. Go check out the finale event. I've announced it on Twitter and Facebook and on YouTube itself. And I would really love to see you there and to talk about some more of these things. But just right here, just to say this right now at the end of all of these videos, is that I feel so appreciative and a little exhausted. Actually, a lot exhausted. So thanks also to the Patreon supporters who made this possible. They are really the backbone here. Without their help, none of this could happen. So shout out to them and to all the members in the different social media currents. That's also appreciated. All right, that's all I had to say, except for you guys are awesome. I didn't think that I would be able to look at 165 scores in so short a time, but you made it all worthwhile, and I appreciate that hugely. See you all soon. Hope to see you at the event.